What is monkeypox and should we care? Monkeypox is a disease that was identified in 1958 in animals and then was found also be able to infect humans. It's a zoonosis. And the most recent interest in this disease is that there are over 200 cases worldwide, and they're scattered throughout the world, not only in Africa, but especially what's new is that it's in many developed countries in Europe, North America, as well as Australia. And these diseases are often not associated with travel to sub-Saharan Africa, as it has been in the past. It has principally been a disease of West and Central Africa. But these have been individuals who have no connection to travel and sometimes have no connection between them. There's been an association with genital lesions and men who have sex with men, but that again is not firm, and we don't actually know everything about the transmission of this disease. The disease is similar to smallpox, a disease that was eradicated in the 1970s, officially declared gone in the 1980s. And it is the same kind of virus, a DNA virus, as opposed to an RNA virus, which is what we see with, for instance, COVID-19. So it's a different kind of virus, and it leads to a very different disease that is principally affects the skin. It produces lesions that are macules, that is little raised areas. It produces blisters and then produces pustules that then will scab over and then fall off. And this is a typical way that smallpox would present, but smallpox would be much more virulent. And deaths are relatively rare or unusual in this disease. In the Congo, it's about 10% of cases. In West Africa, which is the source of the most recent outbreak in Europe and the United States, that variant usually produces maybe 1% of deaths. But it is not the kind of disease that we associate with COVID in other ways as well. Since it is a skin disease, it is primarily transmitted by cell contact, skin-skin contact. And there is shedding of virus in oral lesions and nasal secretions as well. And there is a risk of it being transmitted as droplets, but not as the small aerosols that COVID is highly transmissible, where you have to mask and have those kind of precautions. So on the whole, it is a disease that is less of a concern that it's going to become a pandemic, that it's going to spread easily to a large group of people. Traditionally, it has been less than 200 people, small groups. Recently, looking at the virus, the question is, are we looking at something new? The sequences from this virus look very similar to most West African viruses, but there are differences, and we don't know how to interpret those, whether they mean this is more transmissible to humans than it has been in the past, or what is also very likely is that we have changed, that something about the way that people exist in their interactions has led to this outbreak. And it is an outbreak, it's an epidemic. What you should do, the risk of this disease is if you have come in contact with someone who has had a diagnosis of monkeypox. A recent travel to West Africa, there was a large outbreak not long ago in Nigeria, and that's where most of our imported cases had come from most recently. There was an outbreak in the United States in 1983, I believe, in Illinois from a pet store where Gambian rats, everybody wants to have a Gambian pouched rat, had infected prairie dogs, and people buy prairie dogs, and there had been about 47 cases in the United States, clustered in 6 or 7 states due to this outbreak from a pet store. But other than contact with animals and contact with someone who has recently had evidence of disease, there is little risk. Again, I would say that in some animal studies, the virus has been shown to be transmitted in the skin, even though it's asymptomatic. And some of these cases, in human cases, people have not presented with the usual fever and other evidence of disease. So it's possible that it can be transmitted more surreptitiously and not have obvious lesions. But failing having knowledge of contact, most people should not be worried about this disease. If they do have contact with somebody who has had this disease, they should isolate themselves, get in contact with the public health authorities, and consider vaccination. Unlike COVID-19, where we had no idea and it was a totally new virus, we know this virus. This virus is very similar to smallpox, for which we had a very good vaccine, the smallpox vaccine. And the smallpox vaccine, which is about 80 or 90% effective for smallpox, is also effective in vaccinations for monkeypox. One of the reasons we may be seeing more of this is that we no longer vaccinate for smallpox. And most of the people who have been infected have been people who are younger, who have not been vaccinated for smallpox. And that's the reason that we may be seeing more cases now, as more and more people are no longer immune to the smallpox virus. Back in the 1700s, Jenner, this is the first common vaccine that we had used, and it has the same idea. It is not smallpox virus, it's the cowpox virus, which is similar to the smallpox virus. And it was noticed that milkmaids who would get cowpox tended to have very clear skin, and that's because they never got smallpox. Jenner would vaccinate using a lancet in which you'd puncture the skin repeatedly in order to introduce the virus. And then the virus would replicate in the skin a little bit and people would become protected. With this needle, what it did is it has that little groove that when you put it into a vial of smallpox vaccine, it would entrain the correct amount of vaccine right between those prongs. And then that would be delivered to the skin. About 15 punctures is what you needed to do, and then see blood would appear afterwards. But that's the way it was delivered. And then hopefully you dispose of the needle. It's a one use. What was used before then for mass vaccination was the injector gun, which makes me remember the third thing that I wanted to say. We got bigger problems in monkeypox. This is being recorded a day after about 21 people died of a mass shooting. And we still have more than we have hundreds of people who are still dying of COVID-19. Monkeypox is not our biggest problem. But anyway, back to this. They used the jet injector, but the thing is that that's a mechanical device that not everybody has, is not accessible. And in addition, it would actually be contaminated with blood and even suck blood back into the injector. So it would actually have the possibility of transmitting other diseases along with the injector. This was much safer. It seems low-tech. But the important thing about technology is not that it necessarily is mechanical or that it uses electronics, but that it is the right tech for the right condition. And this is better technology in that it could be used simply by almost anybody, and again, it was disposable. There were thousands of these. This one actually was found in a desk that I used to own that was left by somebody back in the 1980s at Case Western Reserve. So this is actually from the original smallpox campaign. But after 9/11, the US government ordered millions of these needles, thinking that we might have bioterrorism attacks, so that there are these out there. And recently the government has ordered more smallpox vaccine in order to think about if we should have a bigger problem with monkeypox. Vaccination is one thing that you can do as prophylaxis for the disease for somebody who thinks they may have been exposed to monkeypox or household contacts, for instance. What I like to talk about with this is the marriage of public health and technology. It's not really a marriage because they actually represent the two sides of the same phenomena. There has always been a back and forth between technology and public health. The problem is sometimes they do get divorced, so that people in the laboratory think that's all it needs. For instance, we just have to make a vaccine, but we don't have to think about vaccination. Or if you think about vaccination, there's no vaccination that happens if you don't have a vaccine. So we need to have those two things work together. And this is a public health instrument. That is, we have technology here, but also it was designed thinking about having to deliver it to people. And that's what I like about this.